Welcome to the Harber Show. This is part 2 of our special 2-part series with Peter Isely of Ending Clergy Abuse. So, Peter, we were talking about just the revelations of the church and the Catholic Church, and in particular, what is coming out now, where in some cases there have been these faux attempts at transparency, and we're finding out that only at times a small percentage of the real information is being released. Where do you think we are in that process overall? Let's talk about it in the United States in terms of the information really out there. How much of the information that actually exists has been made available? Are we seeing as half of it, 2/3 of it, only 10% of it? Give me a sense of what else is out there.
Where we have the most complete information has come through various means. Grand jury reports, there's been like a dozen of those, I think. Where there has been civil and criminal prosecution, especially civil prosecution, where a victim can take the church to court. There's a fight that's been going on a long time, which people can help with, passing what's called the Child Victims Act. The Child Victims Act opens up a window of time for any victims of sexual abuse.
So it addresses the statute of limitation problem.
It does, and it has to be reformed. It's just passed in New York State, which is extremely important. It passed in New Jersey. It's been one of the effects of the tipping point that has occurred here since Pennsylvania. But what that allows to be done, of course, is that when those cases are filed, that you can get those documents. They have to legally give the plaintiff counsel those documents, and there can be depositions. Bishops have to go under oath. They have to answer questions, which is very interesting to watch. So where that's been allowed to happen, that's where we're getting full disclosure. We have to get the full document set, but we also have to talk to victims and witnesses. So I'd say probably, and I'm somewhat careful here, but I would say optimistically, maybe under 1/3, where there's been bankruptcies in dioceses too, that we have a pretty good picture. But still, the vast majority of them, they're sitting on top. Each diocese, they have what's called an archive, and yes, it's called a secret archive in canon law, where they have to put all of this evidence and material. There are tens of thousands of pages of this in every diocese around the United States. They're sitting on top of all this criminal evidence. So we know much of it's there. How do we get it? We get it through court, but these investigations by the Attorney Generals, those are the single most important thing that's happening right now. And the Department of Justice has to do a nationwide investigation of this. It's a nationwide problem. How about a hearing in Congress? 20-some years of this, screaming headlines year after year. There hasn't been one hearing in Congress. They have hearings about everything. That's the kind of thing that has to keep happening, and that's how you get that information and that truth.
What about the fact that so many of these perpetrators have died?
Well, it's unclear. I mean, what's happened as years go on, of course, is that they're going to die. I mean, I think for a victim, if you have determined that they committed these crimes, as has happened, it's important to put that name out there. It's important that they take responsibility for that priest and what he's done. Many victims think they're the only victim. I can tell you, many of them believe that. That's what the abuse does to you. The validation that they get from that, acknowledgement that the church is forced to acknowledge that priest has harmed them. Even if the priest has dead, the legacy that he has left, the victims that are left behind, the families that have been ruined, the generations, of those victims trying to have normal lives, trying to have children, how that's affected their children, that still has to be addressed, even if that priest is dead.
What kind of resources are available today to victims of sexual assault, including victims from potentially decades ago? And I'm particularly interested in what kind of resources are available that are provided by the Catholic Church.
The best resources to go to are good resources that are outside the Catholic Church. I mean, they're doing some things, but this is the institution that harmed you, is not acknowledging and admitting that they harmed you. Victims often have to go back to the church for help because they have nowhere else to go. And that's terrible, and that has to change. I'm not saying they aren't doing some good, but my advice to a victim, is like, don't go back to the church. Find a good clinician. There are outstanding organizations working with adult survivors in every state in this country and in your community. go to them and work this out. You got to go back to the church. That's a very difficult and complicated thing to do. It often re-traumatizes those victims, and there's more and more resources there, and to reach out to another survivor. That's maybe the single most important thing. There are tens of thousands of us now in the United States and around the world, and the most important contact to make is to make that phone call, and at the other end of that phone call is someone who has gone through and experienced what you've gone through, and there's no substitute for that. So that's what that's what I'd urge them to do.
Are there 800 numbers or websites or people victims can contact that are dedicated? These resources are dedicated to those victims, those people who have been victimized by priests?
Yes.
So very specifically, not just a general rape hotline or anything like that.
No, so SNAP, and the website is snapnetwork.org. SNAP is all volunteer, basically. There's not some big budget. It's all volunteer. We're all struggling as best we can with each other, but that's the call to make. If I'd say, make a call somewhere, and there are survivors around the United States, and there are chapters around the United States, so they'll get you in contact with someone from your community or your state who's a survivor that you can talk to and meet with, or join together as a group and get together and begin the process of healing for yourself.
So there are two groups I'd be really interested in your take on. I mean, first of all, priests. I would think the vast majority of priests find this behavior abhorrent, see it as undermining the church. What are they able to do? What have they done? What have the priests who know this is not or shouldn't be representative of the Catholic Church, what have they done?
Well, in some case, over the years, a lot of them have left. I mean, that's sort of the problem. I tell Catholics, don't leave. Okay, it's you can leave, and I've given up on this. I'm like, solve this and then take off. I've worked with priests in my community. We formed an alliance of survivors and clergy. We had to actually meet in secret. These clergy were so terrified to be aligned with survivors. I mean, their jobs are at risk if they openly begin to align with this issue. But we did some great work together, and I have a tremendous amount of respect. Some of those priests came forward with us. Some of them are very close friends of mine now. I mean, they're suffering under this. They themselves cannot preach the gospel. I mean, what this has done to them, that the pedophilia and priesthood, pedophile priests, that alliteration has now become almost global. But they need to show a lot more courage. When priests in a diocese stand up to their bishop, and it's never really happened, it's unusual, but when they do that, that bishop's going to pay attention and the Vatican's going to pay attention. I think they've just gotten so accommodated to it. They don't like it. Of course they don't. I mean, they're appalled by this. But they tell me all the time, well, there's nothing I can do. What can I do? It's my job. If I say something, if I do something. I mean, I'm frustrated, obviously, about this. But if there's a natural alliance to me that's not supposed to happen, but they can really make a change, it's between survivors and clergy, priests, priests of conscience, good priests. You bring those together, and I'm hopeful that's going to happen. I know priests around the world who have contacted us in ending clergy abuse. I think they need to draw strength from survivors, and I think they need to join us in our cause. But some of them that have not had a good outcome of what has happened to them by their bishops and cardinals for doing that.
So is the church making an example of those priests?
Yes, and they all know it. They're sent off to some remote, place. Their positions are taken from them. And the worst thing is that they're no longer part of the group. You're no longer one of us. And a lot of these priests, they went to minor seminaries. They've been in this thing since they almost were children. And that's their entire life and identity.
All right. When we come back, I'd like to talk about the public, talk about parishioners, and your take on the impact this is happening on the most critical group of the Catholic Church, and those are Catholics. We'll be right back in just a moment.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email harbertv.com.
Safely stop fires around your home. Introducing the Fire Ice XT 20-ounce aerosol canister. Fire Ice XT is an eco-friendly water-based fire suppressant gel. Unlike a traditional fire extinguisher, Fire Ice XT is a highly effective, non-toxic firefighting agent that is easy and safe to use around your home, family, and pets. Available at Amazon.com or call 800-924-4874.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbortv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. This is part 2 of our special 2-part series with Peter Isely. So I'm really interested in what the public is thinking and the members of the public who are Catholic, because obviously if what has gone on and what is going on undermines people's belief in the church and maybe even their belief in God, that is going to have an extraordinarily detrimental effect on the Catholic Church. Has that begun to happen? To what extent has it happened? How is the church addressing it? What's your take on all of that?
It has been happening. And again, this Pennsylvania grand jury report, it took a lot to get to that. A lot of things had to happen before that, but it was a tipping point. And things have dramatically changed, I think, that landscape since that point. They're losing a lot of Catholics. The millennials, it's almost non-existent to some extent. Go to a Catholic Mass, most Catholic Masses, everybody, skews upward 50, 40, 50 and upwards. They really do. They don't seem to be that concerned about the future. One of the bishops at the Bishops' Conference said that for every convert they're getting, they're losing 6 people. But it's a very big ship. Okay, it's got millions of people in it. They can withstand yet another bad news cycle, even though there's this hemorrhaging and losing of people. And I think the concern is that, they'll be okay, the bishop will be okay, the hierarchy will be okay, they're well insulated, they'll be fine, and that even though they say they have a problem with this and how horrible it is that people are losing their faith, they seem to have almost no urgency about this. I've been at that bishop's conference, like the one I was just at. The lack of urgency on their part is really astounding, and I'm not quite sure what to make of that. I think for Catholics, nobody's tried harder not to be a Catholic than I am. I told that to Archbishop Dolan when I first met him, and I've had an interesting experience with him. He's now the Cardinal of New York. He ended up hiding $7 million before their bankruptcy into a cemetery trust. Okay, fraud. But, I think for Catholics, this is, of course, very, very difficult for them. I don't think they know what to do. They are not within a structure or church that really empowers them to do much of anything. There is no balance or a power or some sort of sharing of power with lay people. One of the things that was so threatening about even the ideas that the bishops in the United States here were proposing after the McCarrick scandal was that you get lay people involved in examining, reports coming about a bishop that's an abuser. And there was no way that Pope Francis was ever going to let that happen. And it's not going to happen. So, I really think they don't know what to do. A lot of it, too, is that they see it as their individual faith. I mean, religion, particularly in America, is really kind of a private thing. And they're part of a community, and that's why people belong to religion, in some significant way. But it's almost like my salvation. And I don't want to know these things. Or these things are going to be taken care of, or they're handled, or everyone's a sinner, or it's not my priest. I trust my priest. So we're okay over with ourselves. One of the things that we do at SNAP, have done over years, it's very cost effective, okay, with this work, is that when there's a priest that's been identified and determined in the parish to have assaulted a child, because the diocese often doesn't let people know or doesn't do much to really let them know, we'll go to that parish on Sunday, right? And we'll flyer outside information about that priest. If you know a survivor or a victim or have information, where to call law enforcement, where to get help for these survivors. So I've done that many times in very hot and cold weather, et cetera, in many places around this country. And one of the things that I would frequently hear from Catholics who didn't like this was, I have not lost my faith. This did not make me lose my faith. And they're very proud of this. And what I say to them is, it's great that you succeeded where Christ failed, because Christ lost his faith. And the Christ who is my brother, the Jesus who is my brother, is that man on the cross who cried out the absence of God and his loss of faith. Losing your faith, that's not a bar to Christianity. I would actually say it's the entry into Christianity. St. Paul talks about three things that are really great. He says that faith is a great thing, but it's not the most important thing. He says that hope is a great thing, but it's not the most important thing. What he says is that love is the most important thing. This is a religion of love. This is a religion that claims to be a religion of love. And this religion of love that has weaponized these pedophiles who are an absolute, with children, the absolute antithesis, the parody of love itself, inside this religion of love. Shouldn't that cause a crisis of faith if you're a Catholic? It should cause a crisis of faith. I think it should lead them back to the witness and testimony that's at the center of their story that I'm trying to get to. I mean, I can't talk, I'll just talk personally as someone who has struggled with this since being assaulted and raped as a boy by a priest, and what that faith meant to me and my family, and to my mother especially, who went to Mass every day. I come from a family of 8. I have a twin brother. He was also assaulted by the same priest.
Did you know at the time he was assaulted?
No.
Did any member of your family know?
No. No.
When you look at the tens of thousands, or actually hundreds of thousands of, in particular, boys who were assaulted when they were young, I assume it was typical for them not to say anything to anyone.
Do you know what the average age for a victim to first speak to somebody about this?
I'll guess. 30.
Up.
40.
Up.
50?
Like 51.
Yeah.
I mean, I came out and talked about it when I was in my 20s, which was really unusual, as I found out.
Rare.
Very rare. But it's the nature of criminal acts against a child like this, the violation of the body this way. That's the nature of this crime. I mean, we can, and that's just in general about child sexual assault. I mean, it's getting better for kids to be able to come forward and talk about this. They don't even know when they first talk about it what they're talking about. They just know that there's something wrong, terribly wrong, that their life has somehow, there was a day before and there's a day after. There was a moment and a moment after. And it's difficult for people to understand this, but I'd look at it this way. Maybe it'll help people. You know, what these crimes create, as all crimes do, but especially these crimes, and what it should logically create, is shame. And logically, it's the perpetrator, it's the offender who should feel that shame, but he doesn't. It's like that shame is like a pitcher of water, if you can imagine this, and he pours that shame, that violation, that fundamental break with the moral law and taboo, right, of civilization. We're talking basically about a form of incest. And he takes that shame and he pours it into the body of the victim. And it's the victim that carries that shame, that child, because children take in everything. They don't hold back. They're completely open. And it pours into them. And I can tell you, it pours into every marrow of your, every bone, every cell in your body. And you have this knowledge that you carry now, okay, that you do not want, and that you don't even know how to speak. And it's the child who feels like the criminal. That's who feels like a criminal. Coming forward is like saying someone to come forward and saying, I'm a criminal, I've done these terrible, because you feel that horror and shame. That's inside of you. It's returning it. That's why bringing it back to the church, bringing it to law enforcement. Imagine then that law enforcement tells you, okay, we're not going to prosecute, we're not going to investigate, we're taking it back to the church, that you find that out. They thought the same thing. That totally affirms that you're the criminal. You're the one who's done something wrong, and you're the child. So this is complicated. It's complex, but I think at the base of it, until the survivor is able to come forward and speak that truth, okay? And that truth, I would say, ultimately isn't even about that trauma. It's about justice. It's about justice. And when they speak that truth, that is a call to those who hear it for justice and to join that cause for justice. And so I urge Catholics to stay in their church and to call their attorney general, okay, and to make sure that this is happening in their state, and to stand with us, to stand with the survivors, stand on our side, and stand and do that in the middle of your congregation, in the middle of your parish. And I'd say, look, and this is something I've done. Ask their bishop, ask their priest this one question. And I'll ask Pope Francis this. I didn't get my chance in February, but I've certainly asked Cardinal Dolan and Cardinal Supich and others the same question. And I've told them, if you can answer this question, I will be at Mass every day. I will be in the front row, because it gets to the heart of what I'm trying to say here. And I think Catholics have to struggle with this question and the answer they get. And it's this. Okay, you can't be a woman and a priest. I'll accept that for the moment. You can't be a married man and a priest. I'll accept that for the moment. But under church law around the world, you can be a child molester and a priest. And if you can explain that to me, then I'll be in church. And I'll tell you, not one of them have been able to do it.
And they won't be able to.
I don't think so. When I was at Harvard, I had a great philosophy professor, Nelson Goodman, and he used to say, take a sentence, take a proposition, and then construct a world in which that sentence is true. So take the sentence I just gave you, and then construct a world or a universe in which that world is true. And sadly and unfortunately, in some way, that's the world of the Catholic priesthood.
All right, we're going to take our last break. We'll be back with Peter to wrap up.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
The Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again. I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbertv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbertv.com.
Welcome back to the show. This is our final segment with Peter Isely. And remember, this is part 2 of our special 2-part series. So do watch part 1. Both are online. So Peter, of course, there's a lot of discussion about allowing priests to marry, which certainly addresses some issues, but I don't see how that addresses issues related to pedophiles.
most pedophiles actually are married. So in that sense, that's not going to do it. And there's, I've worked with victims from other denominations. The Orthodox Jewish community has gone through, this problem in New York and elsewhere. There's something to also do with the intersection of religion and the place of the minister and that place of power and authority. Personally, I'm not against, why would I be against a man who wants or be married? I think actually women priests. I mean, what I've told the cardinal as well, Supich, maybe it was somebody, but things are changing. But most offenders are male, child molesters. They are. And so
you're talking about beyond the church.
Yeah,
you're
of course.
About
I'm talking
general.
about the general population, right? And so if you want to end child molestation by clergy in the Catholic Church, you just have women priests.
So
that's not something they jumped for, but I thought that's how you could end it.
A creative solution.
Well, you have a gender. This is the thing, because Catholicism, our great universities in the West were founded on the Jesuit, and so forth. So there's there's this good thing, and then there's this weird thing. It's how do you disentangle this? But you have a gender exclusion on an ethical and moral call to the ministry. I don't think there's any explanation for that. I don't think there's any possible way you can rationalize that. I mean, it's astonishing to me. So if you accept that, if that's okay for you to accept that, then there's a lot of other things you're probably going to end up accepting if you're going to accept that. It's not tenable. There's nothing to justify that, in my opinion. Nothing whatsoever.
So last question. I know we're about to run out of time. Catholics in roughly 7.5 billion or a little more now people on the planet, over 1 billion are Catholics. What about the other 6.5 or 6.2 billion people? What should the rest of the world be doing? Well,
the issue of abuse and assault within the field of religion and religious practice. Now, religion is an incredibly complex phenomenon, obviously. But we have these problems in other religions. Tibetan Buddhism, not the Dalai Lama's religion. Yes, the great, I don't know what they think about that in Aspen. But it's a real problem. They have these monasteries where they take in children who are really young, like 4 or 5 years old. And there is a problem of sexual assault and abuse of those children. Well, of course there's going to be. So it's, I think the whole field of religion, and when it comes to the human rights, and that human rights and the rights of children have to be asserted and maintained and constructed within every part of the world, every region of the world, including when it involves people's faith in some higher being or some other being or whatever kind of spiritual practice they have. But that's been very, very difficult to get into that region, to move into that region and to assert those fundamental rights for children over too many dogmas and beliefs which permit and allow this kind of exploitation and harm of children for whatever reason.
And isn't it fair to say it's the power of each religion that allows this to happen?
Yes.
All right, Peter,
yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, that was Peter Isely. We've put his websites and other information up on the screen. Please find out more. I'm Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Please contact us. We want to hear from you. And thanks for watching.